Hello, my name is Vidette Coleman Robinson, and I am the Executive Director for the Association of African American Museums. Thank you for joining us for our conversations from the field. We are absolutely delighted to be able to bring these sessions to you. We have listened to you all for several years, and every single session that we are offering is just one of those things that you guys have said that you wanted to learn a little bit more about. Also, in response to COVID-19, we had excellent programming scheduled and delivered for you that really speaks to what the field is enduring, and will hopefully give you really great items and marching orders to be able to continue to have tremendous tenacity and buoyancy through these crazy times. I am just so proud of each and every one of you for continuing to show your tenacity, your buoyancy, and just your grit as we muster through these crazy times together and locking arms. I would be remiss not to thank the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture's Office of Strategic Partnerships. We are so thankful to the team over there in OSP, who have, whenever we ask them if we can collaborate with them on programming or how can we deliver amazing content to the field, they are absolutely more than happy to assist. And I am so grateful for our continued relationship and partnership. So without further ado, I would like to just get this whole thing started. And thank you so much. Please enjoy the program.
Challenge for Resistance, you'll be able to get this and click on those links, including the link in the bottom bullet point that talks about the EIDL loans and how you can start your application there. We do have a direct link there for your benefit, and you can get loan advances up to $10,000. And those things are helpful because if you're dealing with a temporary loss of revenue, it will be treated as a grant and will not have to be repaid as long as you're trying to make sure you can bring people back. And in the middle of all of this that we're dealing with, I'm involved in a couple of Zoom calls like this, talking with leadership around the country, and including our membership, and just listening to the stories about furloughs and folks who have had to be let go. In one instance, a individual who's working with a park system in California had to make 42 calls in one day telling staff that she had to let them go. And that is tough. And so we want to make sure that besides us giving you some information in all of this, we want to make sure that we're putting our arms around each other and really emboldening the people that are here. I know as leadership, you're dealing with some things that some folks will never even understand. No one wants to tell somebody who they value that they have to terminate their position. So hopefully we can talk about some ways to mitigate these circumstances today. And if you have to make that call and you have to look at your budgeting, you have to look at how you can effectively fundraise going forward, we can help you do some of that on this call. So next slide, please. So just some more information, spreadsheet of relief funds that are that first bullet point. You can see the Artist Relief Fund, the Village Institute for Arts Management, this Chronicle of Philanthropy, help for nonprofits during the coronavirus and uncertain economic times. We want to make sure that you have resources, and we want you to look at AAAM as a clearinghouse for those resources. So I will not go through all of these. Just wanted to bring your attention to those. And when you get the slide deck, you can use any of these that are beneficial to you. But to keep things moving, Vidette. So we have people who know a lot more about this topic than I do. And so I'm going to be quiet and let the experts jump in, because that's why you're really here. And with us today, we have Anna Barber. who is the president and principal consultant for Barber and Associates. And you see the caption there. They're a boutique fundraising consulting firm focused on helping nonprofit organizations achieve their full fundraising potential. Anna is really versed in this and has experience in the museum field. She was at NAMOC for a number of years, worked on their big fundraising project, and was responsible for a large chunk of that money herself. She also has experience with big college athletics at Michigan State and also Miami University in Ohio. So she knows what she's doing. She's going to give us some insight about how we can fundraise going forward. And so she'll be the next voice that you hear. But after that, we have Sharon Rose, who is the Chief Financial Officer for the Charles Wright Museum for African American History. And Sharon is going to help guide us through a conversation about what could we be doing now? What are some things she's facing at the Wright that may be beneficial for those of you on the call, and things you might be able to think about when you're talking with your CFOs and your finance directors as you move forward in this process. And just to get us to be as proactive as humanly possible about the steps that are coming, because we have no idea when we'll be open again. And it is beneficial for us to lay the groundwork for when we are able to return to some semblance of normal. And in the middle of me saying that, I should also say we don't even know what normal is going to be when we get back. We could be looking at a very new normal. So when we're in a position where we're reopening to the public and we can invite people to come back in, I think it's important for us to have the foundation in place, to have the parameters in place so we can be effective as possible as moving to this new wave of what happens post-COVID-19. So at this time, I would like to invite Anna Barber to take over. We're going to get to her next slide. And Anna, we appreciate you being with us today and sharing your information.
Thank you for having me, Ahmad and Vedette. It's been a pleasure being a part of the AAAM Conversations thus far. So we can go to the next slide. This is just the introduction here. So Ahmad did the introduction, so I'll skip the introduction and get straight to the content here, specifically so that we can do a Q&A after this is over, at least briefly. So there are a lot of different strategies that institutions can employ in thinking about fundraising during this COVID-19 pandemic. But there are a few strategies that I want to list here that I think are really important as you approach donors or you prepare to approach donors during this time. First and foremost, I think even without there being COVID-19, having a clear message is always a fundamental necessity in raising money effectively. So being able to clearly define and articulate what your organization is doing, and if there's anything specific that your organization is doing to address COVID-19 currently, I think that you need to communicate that with all of your donors. So if there's any educational initiatives, if there are any collecting initiatives, if there are any direct service initiatives that your institution is doing or partnering with other institutions on, you should really think about making sure that you're communicating that in all of your messages. Arts organizations, as you probably know and understand by this point, are not at the top of the list as far as funding is concerned. So we have to be very, very thoughtful and cognizant about how we are presenting ourselves as institutions and how we are relevant when it comes to this COVID-19 response. Two, you really need to make sure that you're maintaining communication with your current board and current donors. So beyond looking for new donors, making sure that you're touching all of your board members and having in-depth conversations with them about investment strategies, about how your organization may pivot from a financial perspective, but making sure that those conversations are ongoing and that you are keeping them up to speed on what's going on. And then two, make sure that you are communicating with your donors. Far too often our organizations choose to say, or they say, you know, we don't want to inundate our donors with information. Well, all of the other organizations that they're supporting are communicating with them, and those that choose not to support or choose not to communicate with their current donor base will be left out of the philanthropic pool. In your communications, I encourage people to think about making direct solicitations. And there are direct and subtle ways of really thinking about your solicitations. You'll see in a slide a little bit further down, one of the things that I really encourage with all of your solicitations is making sure that you have recognition levels in which you can put in front of donors so that donors know what level of support you are asking for or where they fit in. I've seen too many solicitations, particularly during this time, where they just say, please give, and you can give $25, $50, $100, $1,000, and then that's it. But there's no form of recognition that's tied to it. There's no structure as far as the levels are concerned. So I think it would help your organizations to really push those recognition levels. And if you don't have them, I would encourage you to create them. And examples below. In your solicitations, I do recommend that you specifically reference language around the new tax deduction in the most recent stimulus package, the CARES package, that allows for up to $300 to nonprofit organizations to be deductible, even if you don't itemize. So that is something new this year for 2020, and I encourage you guys to think about incorporating that language into any type of solicitation or information you're sending to donors, because a lot of donors are not aware of this. 3, a DAF. A DAF is basically, it's a donor advised fund. There are a lot of donors out here that have designated a portion of their philanthropic support to their donor advised funds. And they do this in times when things are going well, the money is invested and can be spent for philanthropic purposes over a period of time. So when you're communicating with donors, I highly recommend and encourage you to think about incorporating language related to contributing from individuals' DAFs. This is what the DAFs are poised to do. This is the time when DAFs step up and make the biggest contributions to institutions. And so the way I encourage you to think about DAFs is in your correspondence, you actually want to say, just let people know that you are accepting DAF contributions, and that you would like, in addition to all of the other contributions that they are considering to other organizations, that they consider your organization in any of their DAF distributions for 2020. So if you would like some specific language, I can work with the mod and we can figure out what, some specific language might be that you can just drop into a letter. Additionally, I know it sounds a little bit morbid, unfortunately, but there are a lot of donors that are thinking about their estate plans right now. And so I encourage you to at least put some language in your correspondence related to plan giving, specifically bequest. So for those donors that are closest to your organizations, if they've been thinking about designating a portion of their estate, this would be a good time to make that designation. Number 4, identifying new funding sources. So the reason why I kind of put the solicit and communicate for, above this is because you really want to communicate with your current donors and board. But as you look for new funding sources, both locally and nationally, here are some options to consider. And I have 2 links that have some opportunities listed by geographic area. But go to your local community foundations in the cities in which you live. The community foundations are really stepping up right now and supporting different institutions that are located in their communities. So if you have not gone to your community foundation before, I would encourage you to broker a relationship or ask a board member to broker a relationship to one of your community foundations that you can begin to start receiving funding from them. As Ahmad mentioned, the CARES Act really designated some nice federal appropriations for arts and museum institutions. So there are a lot of different government resources that are available. A lot of them are available right now, as you likely have heard, through your banks. So although Ahmad mentioned that the PPP program is done for the first round of stimulus, I have spoken with a couple of banks that have encouraged people to continue to submit PPP applications. with the expectation that there will be the fourth stimulus package coming down, and there will be more money allocated for those PPP opportunities. And those can come in the form of loans. They can come in the form of forgivable loans. If you use 75% of that for personnel and payroll. And there are a lot of grants that are available as well. I found yesterday, one of the law firms that I worked with also encouraged people to contact their insurance companies, organizations to contact their insurance companies to ask about business interruption insurance. And they may be able to make allocations you may be able to get allocations from your insurance policies directly to help cover some of the expenses that you currently have now. So that's not a direct necessarily fundraising strategy, but it is a strategy for bringing revenue into your organization. Fifth, really think about how you will be preserving and saving cash during this time. Cash is king. And I know Ahmad has an example of kind of something, that he's worked on, so I'll let him give the example. But you really should be going through your budgets line item by line item, making sure you're looking at your recent balance sheets. Where can you reduce expenses? It doesn't always have to come in the form of salaries, but you need to look at where you can reduce expenses, figure out where you can delay payments. A lot of mortgage companies are allowing mortgage payments to be delayed or, rent payments to be delayed. So you should think about how you can delay payments during this time, especially if you are cash strapped and you need to save some. And then if you have any opportunities to accelerate your revenue, say for instance, you have like a gift shop in your museum or within your organization, think about how you can begin to put your product. Who should you be marketing to during this time? I know Christmas is a long time away, but maybe this is a great time to start marketing for Christmas gifts or birthday gifts, what have you, just so you can accelerate the revenue that you can do without being in person. And then I'll let Ahmad give his example really quickly, and I'll go to the last one.
Okay. So what Anna's referring to, and I wish I could say I had the presence of mind to think about this, early last year, but it really was almost a happy accident. We received a nice chunk of funding from the state of South Carolina towards our project. We were in the middle of building historic Michigan Freedom Park, so we got $165,000 in an appropriation. And because we were still working on our master plan document, which thankfully is finished now, we took that $165,000 and put into a CD to mature this year as we prepared for what we thought would be phase one development, and still can be, just a little push behind. So that's going to mature next month. And so because we're at the genesis stage of what we're doing, we're in decent shape. But because we had presence of mind to put that money away and keep it separate from our operating budgets, we actually are really good to go for the rest of this year and going into the next year. And I mean, we're very thankful for that. It just kind of happened that way, but we don't have a shortfall with our very small staff and the things we're trying to do. So we do have some installations. So I would just suggest, if you've got some unrestricted gifts or some gifts that are set aside for future projects, that you think about putting them somewhere so that you can use them later on. And at this point, this may be a little late, but after we get through this, after we make it through this hurdle, going forward, we got some long range projects or an unexpected gift that's not tied into something. Think about doing some investments or putting it away in something that'll mature later, just as a cushion, because it's definitely helping us out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you end up getting a windfall of cash for one reason or another, and you don't need to spend it all this year, do think about putting it into an investment tool that you can use in even 3 months from now, 6 months from now, because we don't exactly know where we're going to be at that time. And then lastly, just really reinforcing Vedette's message at the beginning, making sure that all of the institutions within AAAM are coordinating with AAAM. There are strength in numbers. And as Vidette mentioned, there are quite a few congressional members and foundations that are reaching out to AAAM to ensure the strength and longevity and sustainability of its institutions. And so the more information that we can collect at the AAAM level, the more we'll be able to push resources out into individual museums and institutions. So I think, this is a new process, but I do think that there is the ability really to work together collectively to generate a significant revenue for institutions across the association.
Hey, Anna.
Yes.
Before you move on, and I know that Camille is checking the chat. I just happened to look down here. We have a question. If your organization has a reserve or an endowment, how much of it should be spent down or should it be saved?
So, I think that it's going to be really important, and I think Sharon will be able to answer some of the questions regarding finances, but I think you need to look very, very, very long and hard at your finances so that you are cutting all expenses that you don't absolutely need at this point, right? But these are the times when you use your reserve fund. This is why you have a reserve fund, so that if there's a shortfall in times like this, you can tap into a fund to cover your operating expenses. For those institutions that have reserve funds, this is the time to actually start tapping in. If you don't need it all, be very, very thoughtful and strategic about what you are spending, but this is the time to tap in. On the endowment side of things, most organizations are going to need board approval to touch principal around endowments. So my recommendation is to have the conversations with your board around whether or not you want to actually touch out asset allocations or not. My recommendation would be don't touch asset allocations and don't touch your spending policy at this point. Just spend whatever you've set forth as the appropriate spend rate. So if you're at 4.5% or 5% spend, I think that's where you should keep it. Unless you're in absolutely dire straits, then you may want to consider touching some of the corpus of your endowment. But generally, that's not the best strategy because it'll take you much longer to recoup the money in your corpus going down the road. So next slide. So here are two resources that you can use to look up funding by geography. Both Grant Forward and Grants Plus. I have found two more that I'll include in the slides before you get them, but I want to make sure that all of the resources that are available are at your fingertips. So we'll make sure as the resources come out, you get them. Next slide. So this is a slide that I generally use with organizations in COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 or pre-COVID-19. These are the different unique components of a strong case statement. And in any communication with your donors, these are the things that you still need to communicate. You still need to communicate your mission. This is a very important time to communicate your mission and vision, your uniqueness, your specific needs. So how have your needs changed between 6 months ago to now? Make sure you're articulating what you're doing and what your specific needs are. What are your goals? What are the costs of what you are doing? Specifically, if you're pivoting any of your work into COVID-19 work, how much do you anticipate that will cost? And what is your budget? And then communicating with your donors. If they make an investment in your organization now, what will be the impact on the organization, on society, in your community? So these are things that you should always be communicating with your donors, but especially in COVID-19 times, these are important. Next slide. This is an example of what I talked about earlier, a recognition and benefit program. I think there's some creative ways that you might be able to think about recognizing donors during this kind of like pandemic online world. So if there are donors that are giving at the highest levels, say your highest level is 5,000, making sure that you're doing like bi-monthly or quarterly calls with your CEO and president. Making sure that you're recognizing people online or in e-communications, and letting people know that tax deductions are available. But think about different benefits specifically that you can offer being at home, you know, not necessarily in person, that a donor may be interested in. So you can be creative with what your levels are, but what I do recommend is making sure you have levels in place so that donors know what you want, what you're asking for. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I encourage, you know, all of the CEOs, all of the executive leadership of all of the institutions that are on this call to work very, very closely around creating a pitch for your organization. Make sure that you have a pitch that's 1 minute long, 10 minutes long, and 30 minutes long, so that when you're having communications with donors, you can actually either control, you know, your pitch can be longer or shorter based on a donor's time. But again, communicating your clear and concise mission, vision, priorities, and goals, how your organization is addressing your work and any COVID-19 responses, making sure you are being very transparent about what your budget is and how you are conserving resources during this time as well. And then the impact the donors will have on your program, making sure that you're also including the different giving methods. How does your organization accept gifts, cash, credit card, donor advised funds, plan gifts? Are you set up for these things? Communicate to your donors how you will be able to accept philanthropic gifts at this time. So I'll stop there for now. This is just a brief kind of overview, but I'm happy to take a question or two if you have them.
Yeah, I just sent a message out just reminding people to let us know in the chat if you have questions going forward, and something may hit you a little later on in this. I thank you for especially this last slide that you just put up, Anna. I think this is important for those who are in leadership positions to be thinking whether or not we have a pandemic or not. We need to have a 1 minute, 10 minute, and 30 minute, and we need to let people know what we're doing. And so, for my part, because we are kind of a smaller, just trying to get started thing, just reaching out to donors and saying, hey, look, we're still here, we're still doing things. Here's what we have planned for our online outreach to people, since you can't get into the park and we can't reach you. And I'll give you another example of this. We have a major event, our Juneteenth Festival, which we are probably going to have to cancel. And so we're already rolling out how we can appropriately address the public with this by next month, and then talk about those people who usually support us, what ways they can support it differently from our Juneteenth Festival, which, you know, may not happen in the way that usually happens, but just giving them another directive to think about that goes along the lines of things that they like to support. So just to keep that in mind as well. Anna, thank you so much for that. And I know people will come up with some more questions when we get back into the Q&A. At this moment, and we're looking pretty good on time. I appreciate y'all. We want to move on. Sharon Rose, again, is Chief Financial Officer for the Charles Wright. And we want to give her an opportunity to talk. So I guess we could stop sharing your screen, I guess, for that. And just let's get back to the gallery if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Ahmad. I want to, before we jump to Sharon, I want to just apologize to you guys. I know you see the screen flipping. This is just one of the things of being the guinea pig, you know. I'm trying to share my screen, but I'm also trying to make sure that I'm answering the chat, and there's just a lot going on over here. And as I move through stuff and take myself off of mute, the screen has been flipping. So thank you for your patience with that. But yeah, so we will go back to Sharon, and I'm just going to leave it on this page, Ahmad, because it's just easier for me at this point. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thank you for that, and Ahmad. And hello to everyone. So what should nonprofits be doing right now with their budgets in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, there really is no easy solution. You know, if you're like the Wright, your operating support from earned revenue has come to a complete halt, besides maybe a few memberships that are coming in. the door, and you've had to furlough, some of your staff, and then the remaining staff have had to take cuts. So not really a pretty picture. So today I'm just going to share some things that we're doing at the right to combat this unfortunate position that we're in. And I'm sure some of these things I'm going to go over, well, some have actually already been said by Anna. But some of the things that we're doing is we're requesting our donors to release the restriction on some of our grants. In fact, a lot of our donors have already publicized that they will do that. And so that's been very key for us. I think we've been able to move over as much as $100,000 so far. Everyone still hasn't gotten back to us. So that's been real key for us. We've also contacted some of our vendors and requested extended payment plans. And a lot of them have been receptive to that. We've asked some of our rental clients to consider rescheduling their events versus asking us to give them a refund so that we're not doling money out. And we have also, as Anna mentioned, we have 2 endowments. One of them is at the Community Foundation, so we get an annual distribution from them. But then we have another one that sits on our books that we've never taken from. In terms of dividend income. So we did go to our board and get permission to basically, I just kind of did a calculation similar to what they do at the Community Foundation to determine over the years what that distribution would have been. And then we did get a distribution from our endowment, which is basically dividend income. So in our mind, we weren't really touching the principal. And so that's worked out quite well for us because that equated to almost $500,000. So that was very key for us as well. And then we're also applying for any and everything that we possibly can. Our development team is looking at everything. One thing that I would say that is extremely important for people is to make sure that you have a cash flow statement where you're anticipating what your revenues and your expenses are going to be over the next 6 months. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it's just a good indicator of how long you can operate with what you're expecting. All of us are probably pretty much in the same boat. Critically, institutions, our institutions have to plan for the future. We have to maintain our visibility, our relevance. And so that the right doesn't get ahead of itself, I've made an adjustment to our budget. Our fiscal year end is June 30. So right now, I would be in the thick of creating our budget for 12 months for the next fiscal year. So with so much uncertainty now with what kind of revenue we're going to have, I've decided to only complete a quarterly budget. And so we're doing quarterly at a time. As the months go by, I'm able to see more clearly what revenue is going to look like for even the next quarter. Also, this way, I'm not creating more work for my staff because if we do a full year's budget, we're most certainly going to have to adjust it in the climate that we're in. We have a fundraiser in August, which is in our first quarter, which we're moving from one location to the other that could have been a very big fundraiser for us. But with the pandemic, we're pretty sure it's going to get canceled. So that's going to really affect our bottom line as well. So the other thing with the museum is that in doing a quarterly budget, it's helping because I don't know what the operating support from our city of Detroit is going to do. We do get operating support from them. The city, through this pandemic, has lost about $600,000 a day. And so our mayor has already said that he's going to cut the budget. So there's no doubt in my mind that the recreational facilities and arts and culture spending are probably going to be at the top of his list. Right now, I just don't know to what extent. And so this is really what's driving my preparation of a quarterly budget. And as I get the quarterly budget done for July, August, and September, in late July, I'll also be looking at the next quarter because I should have a better idea of what our expenses and what our revenue is going to look like. But as Anna said, you have to really, the cash flow, I think, is going to be your most probably important document, besides going through your budget line item by line item and seeing where you can make your cuts. For the museum, we've gotten some cuts anyway, just because we're not operating, which is, beneficial. But there's still not enough. And even where we are right now, we may still have to do further cuts in expenses and in staff. So financial leadership in this time, it requires a really unflinching look at your current physical state. And I think that looking at your financials or your budget from a quarterly perspective will probably help put things in better perspective for you. And so with that, I'll take any questions anyone has as well.
Thank you for that, Sharon. We talked about this in preparation for it. I thought the quarterly budget was such a novel idea and something that most people should move towards. That way, it gives you a better hope of tracing where you're going without, upsetting everything that you had planned on doing. And I may actually move towards that myself. I think it's just a great idea. I'm glad she was able to give us.
It's actually a reset. You have to reset right now. Things are not what they used to be. And in my mind, the quarterly budget gives you that reset that we all need.
Indeed. At this time, we have some time left, and I really want to thank Anna and Sharon for giving us so much information in a very succinct and timely fashion. We're going to do something here where we're not going to make you type out. I think we are in a position we can, if you have a question, if you would just tell us, hey, I have a question in the chat, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question to the group, and we'll do it like that. But I will lead off here. Ladies, and this is for either one of you. If you're in a position where you may be trying to cultivate funders, or for Sharon's benefit, you have someone that you've gone to in the past who's been a steady funder for you, what do you think is the first thing you should do for that funder as they're watching all of this tumult and this uncertainty? What would you suggest you do to either give them some solace, or how do you think people should address those funders that you may have an experience with who is looking a little cross-eyed right now about how they're going to help you in the future?
Well, I'll take a first stab and let Sharon answer as well. First and foremost, I think that complete transparency and information on what you are currently doing, how you are currently your resources, increasing your revenue, the more thoughtful and strategic you can communicate, the more thoughtful and strategic you can be about communicating with them, I think that would be helpful. Letting them, reinforcing how much their long-term support has meant to the organization, what it's done historically, how it will help, keep the organization afloat through the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. I think that the top donors that you need to have CEO or president conversations with each one of them. I mean, I would actually set aside, 30 to 45 minutes, 2 or 3 calls a day with those top funders to ensure that they will continue to provide support through this very, very difficult time.
Yeah, I would agree with Anna. And I think that's part of the conversation as we go back and talk to them about releasing the restriction. Because in that conversation, is a great opportunity to talk about what you're doing, what you're going to do with additional money that they give you going forward. So I would absolutely agree that you need to have that conversation with your donors.
So I have a question for Anna. What do you think about the possibility of linking with another organization to make some kind of request at this moment? And we were talking about collaboration, and one of the keystones of what we're doing right now is to make sure that we can give everybody some great ideas and also make sure that we're connecting a little bit more. How do you feel about, even with everything going on, trying to push an initiative with a like-minded institution, and whether or not they're actually in your area, somebody that might be directly outside of your area, but it may be a national funder?
Sure. I think that if the missions and the visions fit, I think that collaboration is going to be the new way of our new normal going forward. So I think donors will actually appreciate having institutions work together. In particular, if you are collaborating with an institution that share the same donors and a few of the same donors that have already historically supported both institutions, I actually think you will be able to get some pretty significant, depending on what you're asking for, but you will be able to get some funding because you're showing kind of a creative, forward-thinking way of approaching business, more in a streamlined fashion. So I do think that collaborations are going to be the way to go. I think that fundraising through, again, AAAM is also going to be very, 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 very critical moving forward, because I think that there will be larger gifts coming out or being allocated to an association that can be distributed amongst its members versus individual members asking for smaller grants, over and over and over again to the same foundations or the same donor base. So yes, collaboration, I think, is going to be critical.
Okay, we have a couple of questions in the chat, so we'll get to both of them. First, we have a question from Dorothy Walker. What suggestions would you give for institutions developing a major fundraising campaign for a major event planned for next year? To either one.
I would go ahead, if it's for next year, I would go forth with it just because we don't know what the future holds. I don't know that I pour a whole lot of money into it, but I would watch the spending, but I would still move forward if it's for next year.
Yep, I totally agree with that as well. And I would also agree with Sharon that watching the spending for next year's galas will be important. Perhaps looking at actually hosting like smaller, higher end functions at your institution versus renting a ballroom, I think would be appropriate. Any type of way that you can incorporate like technology into your gala, I think that shows a very forward-thinking perspective on things as well. And just a point to galas for this year, I know a lot of organizations are saying, hey, that's our bread and butter. We really need to do our gala. We really need to do our events, or else we're going to take, a huge hit from our revenue. What I'm encouraging people to do, instead of postponing your galas, you actually cancel your galas this year and ask for a philanthropic gift for very specific reasons. I think that's a much better strategy than, thinking about whether or not this might actually take place or putting any time or energy into doing it. Just ask for the money. The gala will take place next year. We will not have one this year, and that's fine. I think donors will be okay with that.
And I think you make a good point. I think the faster you get ahead of it and say, hey, and just be transparent, we're not going to have our gala due to health concerns. We don't want anybody to come up and, my event turn into COVID-19 gala. You don't want that. So being able to be transparent and just asking for the funds up front, I feel is beneficial. I am always here for everybody. If you can think of funders who do re-granting, and you think that you want AAAM to be that conduit, I am all for collaborating with any and all funders. Just let me know. We are a small team, but if you have folks on your team that are development staff that can help put together that ask for us, along with me, we can go ahead and put those packets to the funders. So whatever you can think of, if it's dream big, this is the time. And this is the time for us to collaborate like never before. We are a family. AAAM would not exist if we did not think like a family. So let's continue that thought process.
We have, and just as a follow-up, Ms. Walker said, that program is a major civil rights anniversary event for the Freedom Rides, but smaller high-end events is a good idea. The next question comes from Katie Lee. How many times should an organization plan to approach a donor during the pandemic crisis and after it?
I mean, my recommendation is that you have 7 to 9 touches with a donor every single year, just depending on what their donor level is will determine the type of touch that you have with that donor. Whether it's a newsletter, a letter, individual phone calls, board meetings, what have you. So I highly encourage organizations to stick by that rule. 7 to 10 touches throughout the year, even during COVID times, I think is appropriate.
Let me unmute myself so I can talk. We have a question from Vicky Odom. I'd love to know the creative ways programming directors are engaging visitors, residents, guests virtually. And so we are going to do a session on that, but that's in June. So if there's anybody on the call right now who would love to share with Vicky how program directors are engaging your visitors, your residents, and your guests virtually, just let us know and we will unmute you and you can share. But in the meantime, I'll say that we have a pre-K through third grade program, literacy program we do called Griot's Corner. And we read stories, and we have a humongous big oak tree in our park. And so we read various stories underneath the big oak tree in the park, stuff like Anansi the Spider, No Mirrors in My Nana's House, Fate Green Gold's Bus, but If a Bus Could Talk, the story of Rosa Parks. We do activities around those projects, and then we make sure that the instructors get a book. Well, we are working on taking our people who read the book, using some images from the book, and as long as you give the artist credit, and you're not charging him, you should be able to do this online, that we will be presenting those on Wednesdays, starting, I believe, next week, as a part of our outreach to folks who are at the house looking for options to keep their kids activated in some kind of school form, especially for that age range. In addition, we're working on some adult conversations that we'll be promoting on Zoom through our website and our Facebook page, where we're talking to people about what's happening, some connections to our project. So our principal investigator for our archaeological projects is going to talk with us. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, who a lot of you know, is going to speak with us in a couple of weeks about Reconstructionist connection to the 21st century. So we'll put our schedule out for everybody. I'm hearing from Kathy. They're creating a visual tour and they've uploaded to their Facebook page, and I'm working to get it on their webpage. Eric Jones is discussing a hackathon to engage donors to solve problems at the Wendell Scott Foundation. Eric Jones, would you mind unmuting yourself and tell us a little more about that project?
Thanks,
yes.
Eric.
Could everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, so one of the things that we're putting out there is hackathons are used in the technical world to bring people together to solve a problem. We're thinking about engaging donors. We're in the process of trying to get a museum built. We have this COVID-19 crisis. So what we want to do is bring potential donors to the table, lay out a problem, and then have them in their virtual zones go out and think about it. So some of the things that you talked about on the call, whether it's how to raise money, what should we do next year, let some of the people who are giving be involved in the process and think of that and help think through that. One that might not be giving you money or donations at that time, but it's a quick, easy way to get them involved. You can give them a problem, give them 2 weeks to come back. Our first target is high school students, especially high school seniors who are looking for projects to take into college to put on their resume, and also seniors in college who are looking for things to do to put on their resume entering the workforce. So, we're trying to think of some creative ways to get people involved in a low impact virtual environment.
Nice. We appreciate that, sir. Thank you. We're getting a lot of great stuff in the chat. If you're not paying attention to the chat, there's a lot of stuff coming up here. We can make some of these things available to you. But Angela Thorpe said that they're creating a digital interactive version of a traveling exhibition about the Negro Motorist Green Book in North Carolina. Very cool. They made a series of education resources related to the exhibition available digitally. Eve, they're doing their Haitian Heritage Month online, interviewing artists and allow them to showcase their work starting in late April throughout the entire month of May. What is happening in the Haitian arts community, HAPS, Haitian Arts Podcast Series. Let me do us a favor for those of you who are posting things in the chat. I know this was the fundraising call, but we're trying to be as holistic as possible here. If you would drop your websites or links in the chat, because when we do this, we'll get the transcript of the chat and we can share it. And so people will know how to get to your respective sites. The Ralph Mark Gilbert Civil Rights Museum has 360 virtual tours on the website and presentation of public school data in Savannah, Georgia. So put your stuff in. That's Barnett Good Walker. Put your links in the chat. We have approximately 1 minute left here. And so we want to respect your time. We say we keep it to an hour, unless there's some really burning questions here. And Alan has put in the chat, these are great projects right for fundraising. Absolutely. So if you need to think about it, these are the opportunities. You're doing these great things now as pilots, and you can use this opportunity. That's how we're going to call it. We're going to call it an opportunity to fundraise off of these amazing projects that you have done during this crisis. I want to thank again Anna Barber and Sharon Rose for your wealth of information and expertise. We really appreciate you doing this for the membership. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And I want to thank everybody who's in here. I think we were at one point up to 32 participants on this call. That's great for that first call. Please tell your friends and other organizations about this. We'll be doing this again in May. There'll be the other sessions will be going. I think they can get all these dates on the website, Vidette?
Yes, they are all on the website.
Okay, all the session days on the website. We'll be back in May for the Southern region to talk about leadership in this situation. But I strongly encourage you, if you can, to jump on some of those other calls and see what's going on, to stay connected with everyone who is doing the work right now while we're stuck in our houses. But thank you. Thanks for that, for helping us to host this. You worked it out. I appreciate you. Thank you to Camille for shooting me questions privately. Make sure I was paying attention to the chat. I appreciate you, ma'am. And I'd like to just say thank you for being here. I'm going to pick on, Lanisha, do you want any closing comments before we get out of here?
Thanks so much. I just want to thank you all for your amazing support and involvement, for being on. We thank our presenters and facilitators, Sharon, Anna, Ahmad, amazing job today. Vidette, AAAM team, thank you. We look forward to you all continuing to stay engaged with AAAM. We're gonna get through this together.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Vidette, Edie, we're gonna give you the last word here.
Yes, as Ahmad said, thank you all for coming out. This is amazing. These are amazing touch points for us during this time, but just to be, I always say I'm so thankful that we're in 2020 and not 1980 or even 1990 with that horrible dial-up, because we would not be able to do this. I am just so thankful that we are in this technology age where we can, we don't have cars flying yet, but we could do Zoom calls and really just connect with one another. And I am so thankful for each one of you. It's an amazing time to be here at AAAM as ED, but also just to be able to hear from each one of you as you guys have been emailing us and asking very great questions about how to move forward in this time. And you feel like you're stuck, but you don't have to feel stuck. We're here for you. That's what you pay your membership for. And if you're not paying membership, I'm thankful for you to just be here. It's just a very good time. And as Ahmad also said, make sure that you tell your friends. If people are not members of AAAM, it's okay. It is absolutely okay. They can come on to the calls, tell your friends to bring a friend, and we can all be friends on these calls. So I really appreciate each one of you guys. And please, please, please be safe, remain vigilant. And I appreciate and love each one of you.
And then
Oh,
Ahmad is cracking up, so I'm going to let him.
oh, man. Tell your friends we can all be friends.
All friends.
We
All
can do this every weekend.
every weekend.
For those who are unfamiliar with that,
Every month.
we're sorry. Thank you, family. We appreciate you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Enjoy your weekend, and please stay safe. Please stay safe. And remember to wash your hands and wear your mask. I wish all you and your families and your organizations well as we move forward and look for more important things and powerful things from AAAM for the membership, because you are the reason that we're doing this. You are the reason the organization exists, and we should view ourselves as family here. So family, take care of yourselves, okay?
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.